if you look at the Raptors as a destination, we already know it's difficult to get stars to come over here. No one wants to come play for the Toronto Raptors unless it's via trade. Because even Kawhi really didn't want to come here, but they made it work. Do we now throw rookies and young stars into that same pool of players who don't want to come to Toronto?
I don't think so, because I think Grady Dick was pretty vocal about the fact that he liked the Toronto Raptors development staff. He liked the fact that they have a good reputation around the league about the fact that they are good at building their young players up and getting them to a point where they can be starters one day. So I think around the league, the development aspect of the Raptors is pretty much on par with the Spurs, because they realize it's true. Justin, don't make that face. It's true. They realize that the Spurs and the Raptors develop very well within what you've got. So all the rookies that are coming up understand that. The only thing is, do you want to come to Canada? That's, I think, is the main factor, where when they come here, it's a little bit of a different lifestyle. They have to go through customs. It's a little bit more tax. It's it's different, channels, different food.
Different cereal.
It's cold everywhere, but it's just a different
cereal you get up here.
But it's the only city that's not in the States. So it holds different value in the NBA. That's, I think, the only factor there, because I don't believe that players don't want to come here. Maybe they don't want to come here off the bat, but once they're here, they want to stay here. There's so many players that have stayed here and wanted to retain their longevity in Toronto.
Let me ask you that. So if we're talking about like DeRozan, Lowry, now Siakam, right? Could the reason be they want to stay here is because they can get the most amount of money from the Raptors?
Well, let's not forget, Lowry wanted to leave.
He did want to leave. He was about to leave. He was about to go to the Knicks, right?
Even when he first got here.
Exactly. He was about to go to the Knicks, right? And I think...
But then he stayed.
He stayed, but they had a good year the 2014 season. He was able to sign that extension, right?
But Lowry also, his record was like he was jumping teams, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So he wasn't someone that teams thought that, we could keep him in our locker room.
Exactly.
Toronto showed a different side of Lowry, where you were like, he could be a leader. He could be a point guard. He could be the leading point guard. So when he saw that this was his own team, I think matters changed. DeRozan came in the picture as well, and they became a duo. And then after that, they became a team, which we know ended up getting the second most wins in the NBA for the last 10 years. So you created... Is this the time? Is this the time?
I don't even know what you just said.
I said
they got LeBron to Albert. What do you think?
Okay,
what do you think?
So.
No,
Jesus Christ.
I agree with that. So
Jesus Christ.
When you look at the landscape of the Toronto Raptors and their history, right?
Right.
Second best net rating team in the league.
Damon Stoudemire left. T-Mac left. Carter left. Bosch
when was that
left,
happening?
Right? Then you have DeRozan and Lowry stayed, right? But because why? At that point in time, the CBA and the NBA changed, where it motivated teams to keep their players that they drafted or own the bird rights to.
Or because you were good in the league. You were leading the Eastern Conference every single year. You were the second best net rating team in the NBA. What are you talking about? Okay, yes, it's a big factor about the CBA.
Can I finish what I was going to say?
You're wrong, but okay. Continue.
During that time, the CBA came because the whole LeBron made his change decision, go to Miami. At that point in time, the NBA influenced the rule to make sure teams can keep their own players, and that's what the Lowry and DeRozan did.
That's why they stayed, because they put it in the contracts,
Can I finish what I was about to say?
They put it in the contracts.
Can I finish what I was about to say?
No.
They did a great stuff on the court in the regular season. Absolutely put this franchise to levels it had never been before. Because of that, right, they became all-stars. They were able to get max contracts, more money that they were going to get in Toronto than anywhere else, right? That's part of the reason why that's part of the reason why Pascal Siakam is so adamant in staying in Toronto, because he knows he can get the most amount of money in Toronto.
So great business decision.
And nobody else is going to pay him.
So, but great business decision, right? Because you think you will get paid the most in Toronto.
Yes.
So you will tank every value that you have for any other team in the league, where Toronto might not even pay you that. So really, you could take a bigger hit and not take more money, where Toronto could say, no, I don't want to pay you. And then because the other teams are like, well, you're a liability right now because you said I want to be in Toronto.
It's a player's league, though.
But I don't think that's the factor, though. I don't think it's just money involved.
The Raptors don't want to lose Siakam for nothing, right? So if worst comes to worst, they're going to have to sign him to an extension if he doesn't. He's flat out said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to resign anywhere but Toronto.
But if you're saying that he's going to stay here just for the mere fact of money, that's a plus, but that's not the whole reason. That's not the whole reason. It's a good business decision is not to go out there and tank your value throughout the NBA. That's what he's doing.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah, that's not the right. Be surprised if he walked either. If Fred walked for free there's no reason to think that Siakam wouldn't walk in.
And when we talk about destinations, right? We always hear about free agents meeting with certain teams and stuff like that, right? The Toronto Raptors have never, other than Kawhi Leonard, who they had, right? They've never really been at the meeting table. You know, the Knicks are always at the meeting table with
I'm
free
pretty
agents,
sure
right?
they had something going on with Giannis, but sorry, continue.
They never had a meeting because Giannis was never a free agent, though. He was never a free agent.
I'm pretty...
That's
really?
tampering.
When Fred's contract was coming about that time and he had a dip in his salary in the third year, I'm pretty sure they thought that Giannis was going to come to Toronto. That was the whole basis.
But they never
Giannis is a different
I'm
breed,
talking about formal meetings, though.
But we don't know. Justin, do you know that? Did you have a talk with Masai yesterday? Did you know they had the formal meetings? We have no idea about that. We don't know.
Check the internet. Read up. I think they had an interview.
Let's rank like destinations in the East, because I'm looking at Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Brooklyn, Miami, Chicago, Indiana, maybe even Orlando above Toronto.
Orlando, really?
Yeah, I think so. I think players look at Toronto in terms of teams in the East that they'd want to go to. Probably near the bottom.
It definitely is near the bottom of the Eastern Conference for sure.
And it's a problem Toronto has had before, and I think that will always
going to
be. It's
there.
never going to change.
I will say this on this matter. I think this is a problem. I think getting the U.S. players here to get them to play in a different country, because they honestly view us as foreign. They view us as exotic. They think that it's not, and I don't blame them, because if you go to the States, you see that there's differences in how they live and how we live, right?
Absolutely.
So I get that. But at the same time, I don't buy the narrative that they don't want to play here, because I've seen players tank their value. I've seen them go out and embrace Toronto, and I've seen them, once they've been brought here to Toronto, really want to be a part of this team.
They don't want to stay
Look at Serge Ibaka. Look at Marcus.
International players are different than U.S. born players, though.
Half the league is international right now. What are you talking about? They're all from Europe and Africa.
I'm saying the international players are different. They will come to Canada, right? But I'm saying, if you look at just the American-born superstars, hell,
LeBron is one of premier, Justin.
Let's talk about Giannis right now, right? If Giannis is a free agent, right, any team can have him, right? Is he going to Toronto, or is he going to go to New York, Miami, L.A., wherever else, Chicago, right? He's talked about wanting to play for the Bulls before, right? Is he going to pick Toronto? No. Is Luka Doncic, if he's a free agent, going to pick Toronto? No.
Okay, we're gonna go into
Is Nikola Jokic gonna pick Toronto? No.
It's all about the money off court as well. People
exactly.
Forget.
But it's
you make more money off court in the States.
But it's also about how you get recognized. Because for these guys, if they go to America, right, they're gonna be the outsider there. But if they're in Canada, they are now the outside, but still in the NBA. If you think about it, that's how they view this. They're like, we're still absolutely, because they're not a part of the U.S. though. They find themselves to still be still be outside of the U.S. picture, but they're in the NBA. So the lifestyle is different than what you get in the States. So for guys like Giannis, Luka, Embiid, getting them to Toronto, there's no factor of, they have a family out there. They've lived out there before, so they know about taxes. They know about the difference of lifestyles. They don't know that. So for them, this could be even better. And at the same time, too, let's not forget, the biggest factor of Toronto, global melting pot.
But here's the thing.
Can get
what it comes down to is this. You said it. Endorsement money, right? Kawhi Leonard could have been the big, and again, it's American.
And he
player.
was.
He could have been. He was the biggest athlete in Canada. Bigger than any hockey player. Bigger than any other athlete.
You can't compare Kawhi.
He had Canada in his hands. Turned away to go to the States to make more money. And that would be the same. You can make so much more money in the States as an international. It doesn't matter if you're international. Luka Doncic is in the States, has his own Jordan.
Completely disagree with that.
Why?
Insanely.
You can make way more money as endorsements in the U.S. than you can.
Kawhi Leonard was Canada.
I agree with. I would agree on that.
He could have made no. He could have made so much more money by just being the face of Canada, which he was. It wasn't just, listen, the States has different states and cities, and within those states they have two different cities that have different basketball teams. Canada has one team. For you to get marketed here, you would be the guy in the entire country. He chose to go to LA to
be behind LeBron. What happened when he went to LA? He had a New Balance commercial.
LeBron.
He came to
comes down
LA
to LeBron.
After LeBron.
It's all about LeBron.
What I'm saying is this. He came to LA behind LeBron James, right? He's the one who came with the keychain dance.
Justin,
Hold on, let me finish. He came, right? He was in the Terminator commercial. He had all these commercial jobs. Once he went to LA, he went to the Clippers, right? What happened? He started making rap albums. He started being way more viewed because what happens when you go to LA, you go to New York, you go to these big US cities, the chances
he was the king of the North.
And he turned it down to be second fiddle in LA with the Clippers.
Hold on one second. If you're comparing Kawhi Leonard, a player that he doesn't give a flying F about anything outside of his basketball
That's
abilities.
not true. Kawhi's smart. He knows he can get endorsement money by playing that quiet guy stuff. He's a smart guy.
Toronto. He could have had a dynasty in Toronto. He's smart. Look at what has he done in LA right now? Absolutely nothing. If he was smart, he would have stayed here, won dynasties, built himself a brand to be the guy. He was the #1 player 2019 because of Toronto. He was
also healthy too.
So
because of the Raptors staff.
I understand what you're trying to say because I get the dynasty thing. But clearly, the money that was involved with going to LA trumped the dynasty.
I think what happened to him was family, though. Because for Kawhi, it's different.
He wanted to go home as well.
He wanted to go home. It wasn't about anything because he could have gone anywhere. Even with the Spurs, he was like, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to go back to LA. He wanted to be back on home. Mm-hmm. And then he got shipped out to Toronto. And he said, you know what? Let me build up my trade value again in Toronto. He did that. Won the championship. But his thought process never changed. He wanted to be back at home with his family in LA, and he did that. But Kawhi is a different breed. You can't compare him to the likes of any of the superstars today in the NBA or anywhere else because he doesn't care all the things that we think that they care about. He's not like that.
I think another reason why he went to LA is because it's easier to attract stars to LA than it would be in Toronto. It'd be much more difficult for him to do that.
But hold on.
But on the way to LA, he was like literally in transit was on the phone talking to players.
Yes.
Going to LA. It would have been much more difficult to convince those guys to come to Toronto. I get what you're saying. I think as a player, a purely basketball move, I think the move probably would have been to stay in Toronto.
No, I get that. But what I will say though is had the league stayed the same, the way that it was, right? Had he stayed in Toronto, had he had the same squad around him in Toronto, I think that team would have
gone back to back.
No, not just two-peated. They would have been a dynasty like the Warriors. But he gave that up for something that was going to be that's got nothing out of it right now. He was injured. Clippers have done absolutely nothing the entire years, right? Ever since he's gone there. So for me, it's like if he wanted to win, the clear answer was Toronto.
Yeah.
The clearest answer ever. Because he could have had not just the one championship, but back-to-back and maybe even a third back-to-back-to-back, right? But when he went to Clippers, not LA, Clippers. And back then when Kawhi went there, Clippers were also a very young team who had no direction. They had just fluked themselves into a very good year that year because they had young guys who were hungry and wanted to win. But you put Kawhi there, would that have been a factor like, oh yeah, Kawhi will be that guy to win them? Absolutely not. They got nothing done. Had he wanted to win, it would have been Toronto. But he wanted to go back home. Yeah. And for home, that for him is LA.
From a basketball decision, just strictly basketball on the court. Right, I totally agree that he should have stayed in Toronto. It would have been the best decision for him.
But that's what I'm saying. For him, it's different.
But we're talking about outside of basketball and off the court, which a lot of NBA players care about now is what's going on off the court. More the chance to blow up your brand off the court is in the States, in big media markets, rather than Toronto. Toronto's a big market.
Hold on. So do you think Gary Trent would have gone off how he did in Toronto, but had he been anywhere else? Because he was with the Blazers. Nothing ever happened there. He could have gone to Clippers.
But he was
nothing
stuck
ever
behind
happened
Dame
there.
Lillard and CJ McCollum at the time.
This is where I don't agree, though, because I think what we factor in is the U.S. market, and you forget the Canadian market. Canada also has a market, and you have a full country behind one team. Don't forget that. You got a full country behind one team. We could have propped up Kawhi, and we had to be the best player in the NBA. He walked away, whatever, but I think Toronto is still a hotbed, and it will be growing in the future.
Yeah, no, it's true. Listen, the Toronto Raptors are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. Thanks in part to Kawhi Leonard for winning a championship here.
Yeah.
What's
that? Sorry, Vancouver.
Don't worry. Don't even worry.
Get yourself a team.
Don't worry. One day, I'm going to be owning an NBA team in Vancouver, and don't you worry. Don't you worry.
When you dream tonight. When you're falling asleep tonight.
Oh, be nice.
Don't worry. Don't you worry. Don't worry.
This was fun, though. This was great. The thought, Raptors fans just thinking, what if Kawhi stayed? How many more championships? I'm sure Golden State would have had one in between there at some point.
They would have stopped Milwaukee. They probably would have stopped,
So anyway, it didn't happen. Kawhi is in LA. The Raptors are still the Raptors. We don't know what they're going to do, but hopefully they figure it out soon so we can talk about it on this show.